Hi, I'm Jen Drummond. Welcome to Seek Your Summit. As a mom, a business owner, and the first female to climb the 7-second summits, I realize that the mountains we climb are a part of our success. And it is up to us to go beyond that success into a life of significance. Hey everyone, it's Jen, Seek Your Summit podcast. Today we're going to do things a little different. Today I am going to be talking and doing a solo episode. This is my first one, so I'm pretty excited. The reason why I'm doing this is because we're changing up the podcast a little bit. I decided that I like podcasting, but I really like interviewing people in person versus doing it over Zoom. And so trying to coordinate these interviews takes a lot more work than just sending a Calendly link. Now I have to make sure our calendars connect, we can be in the same city at the same time, coordinate a podcast studio, and all those fun details. So to give myself some time, I'm going to be recording solo episodes for the next 7 weeks. And these episodes are going to cover different chapters in the book Quitproof, 7 Strategies to Build Resilience and Achieve Your Life Goals. If you haven't bought the book yet, buy the book. Because even though we're going over each chapter in detail, you're still going to need the book to get all the goods. This is kind of bonus material if we put it out there that way. So I'm super excited about this. Expect the episodes to be a little bit shorter than what our normal podcast episodes are, but still filled with great information. So for today's episode, we're going to go over chapter 6, Recognize When It's Not Your Mountain. I know, I should be going in order, but I thought it was appropriate because I decided to pivot on the podcast, and this chapter is all about pivoting, persevering, and maybe turning around when the pursuit you're taking on no longer applies. So the chapter of this episode is called Recognize When It's Not Your Mountain. I've been in this scenario. I've been out to K2 in 2021, which you'll read about in the book, and we were acclimatizing on Broad Peak. Things did not go as planned and actually ended up pretty bad. And I turned around before I got involved in that mix. And I realized, you know what? I'm spending time on this mountain, putting my life at risk on this mountain, and it's not even one of my mountains. I'm trying to climb the 7-second summits. Broad Peak is an 8,000 meter peak. Doesn't apply to me. So I turned around. And I think there's a lot of times in life that we start climbing the metaphorical mountain, and then we realize this isn't the dream job. This isn't the relationship I want. And this passion project really isn't igniting my passion anymore. So how do we know? How do we know when it's time to say, let's cut the cord and do something different? I think that's a very individual decision that comes with a lot of self-awareness. But there's some cues that your body and your system kind of gives you that I think you can get used to cluing into. One of them would be, am I lacking passion for this project? This happened to me before. Okay, so I was doing triathlon when I first moved to Park City because it was a great way to meet people. Triathletes train all the time. So here I am doing triathlon, kind of going through the motions of it. I didn't like swimming, but I did it because it was good exercise and I liked the running and I loved the biking. And I kind of got caught up into it. And then I started getting competitive with it. And I started traveling to races and all this different stuff. And then one day I was in a race in Santa Cruz. And Santa Cruz has freezing cold water that's filled with seals, that's also filled with sharks, and you can't see the bottom of the ocean. I'm one of those people that makes up sea monsters trying to chase me when I can't see the bottom of something. So this race put me out of my league on a lot of levels. And I realized while I was running it and biking it and swimming it, like, I don't even know if I even like triathlon anymore. Like, is this really what I want to be doing with my time? I finished actually in the top 10, so it wasn't that I didn't perform well. It's just I realized I really wasn't having as much fun as I originally was when I started this pursuit. So over the next 3 months, I kind of documented my enthusiasm for the sport. And I realized that I was kind of sick of riding my bike on the road. I like to mountain bike.
I was kind of sick of road running. I like to trail run. And I was definitely not having fun at any of the pool workouts or the lake workouts. And I realized, you know what? I'm going to give myself a break. I'm going to step away from triathlon. I still haven't stepped back into it. And that's okay. I got to redirect my passion and my energy into other pursuits. And I'm super happy not doing triathlon right now. So if you notice that your passion's just not quite there anymore, put some parameters and some boundaries around it. Make sure you're not making an emotional decision, but you're making something that really makes sense for you long term. Maybe it is time to turn the leaf and pick up a different sport. Another thing that I like to connect to is my why. Because sometimes we start out on a pursuit, and then as we start doing the pursuit, we learn things, and it really doesn't line up with what we thought it would be. And I'm talking personally about an experience that I had getting my pilot's license. So I thought it'd be really fun to have a pilot's license. I could go fly somewhere, go shopping with my friends, take all my 7 kids on vacation, not have to go through TSA and all the airport things that you know. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna get my pilot's license. So I call an instructor and I get him on the phone. He's like, yeah, let's go. And I get to the airport and I realized that there's a lot of checklists in flying. In fact, for us to do an hour flight, we spent like an hour and a half making sure the airplane, the gauges, the gas, like all the little things were good for the flight. And then when we were up in the air, we spent like 99% of the time evaluating the scenery so that if something went wrong with this airplane, we knew where to safely land it. I thought I was going to be flying and listening to music and looking at the horizon and just having a great time. And I realized I was super stressed every single time we flew because we always had to be worried about something going wrong. Okay, so that was kind of like my first clue. But I'm one of these like people that's hard to stop. Okay, so I'm like, you know what? Maybe I'll get through this and it'll get better because I'll get more comfortable and things won't be as scary. So I'm going to take 2 of my kids with me. So 2 of my kids come on the plane with my instructor and we're going to fly over my house. I think this is going to be a great experience. My kids get in the plane and they wonder if they can have a drink. No, we don't have a stewardess. Like, I'm surprised you can even fit in those little seats that you're sitting in. So no, there's no drink. And then they decided, like, where was the TV because they wanted to watch a movie. Yeah, well, we're not watching a movie. This isn't Delta. This is like our private little plane that we're flying in. Look out the window, be excited, be happy. And then we get over to the top of the house. We're like, okay, cool, house. Mom, I have to go to the bathroom. Yeah, well, there's no bathroom on this plane, sweetheart. Do you see how tiny it is? And so my idea of this great flight with my family was like landing the plane, asking them to stop poking each other on top of all the things that happened before. So that's checkbox number 2, that this quite isn't working out like I thought it would. Again, I'm like, I don't want to quit. I'm going to do this thing like I set out to do it. Here we go. So I am about to take my final exam. And my instructor calls me and he's like, hey, Jen, before you take this exam, you need to call your insurance company and tell them that you're going to become a private pilot. Okay. So I call my insurance company. And my insurance company is like, okay, well, now your rates are going to be 7 times higher than what they were before. I'm sorry, what? They're like, yeah, being a private pilot is very dangerous and your life expectancy goes down dramatically. And so we have to increase your insurance premiums. I'm like, okay. So I'm driving to my appointment to take my final exam. And the entire time I'm driving, I'm like reconnecting. I'm like, why did I want to fly in the first place? I wanted to fly in the first place to make life easier. I realized in getting my license, it was going to make life a lot harder and the cost benefit just wasn't there anymore. So when I went to meet my instructor, I told him like, hey, I'm not going to take this test. It just doesn't make sense. I know I could pass it if I wanted to, but I don't want to. And he totally understood and I walked away from that pursuit. I was okay with it. So when you're looking at your own pursuits and you're wondering, is this your mountain? If you can't connect that to your why anymore, maybe it's not. And that's permission to go a different direction. So another thing to think about when you're evaluating on whether this is your mountain or not anymore is recognizing that priorities change, right? I was building a business. I was getting into rental properties. I had like all these financial goals going on. I didn't have kids. All of a sudden, kids entered the scene. And then somebody had a problem at a rental property. And then this was going on and all these things. And all of a sudden I realized that right now I'm in the season of raising children. I do not have the bandwidth that I used to have to take care of all these investments that we had that actually took quite a bit of time. And so then I started looking at our portfolio and saying, okay, what's going on with my life that I don't want to handle anymore? I don't want to handle somebody else's broken refrigerator. I don't want to handle something going on with a garage door at one of the rental properties. So we ended up getting out of those for a while because I needed to have my priorities line up with my children and what I valued at that time that I didn't foresee happening before I had kids. So look at your life. Do you have parents that are getting sick? Are you traveling to a new location for work that you weren't traveling before? Do you have children that are taking up time? These are all different things that shift your priorities and are good reasons to decide that maybe the mountain you were originally climbing doesn't make sense anymore. And then finally, one thing to consider is the opportunity costs at play. This is another kid thing. Have kids in your life. It will change everything, I promise. So when I first moved to Park City, I got a job as a ski instructor at the ski hill. There's great benefits. They gave us free lessons. I got to meet other instructors. I learned the mountain really well, so I knew all the secret stashes, and I really liked the job. I only had to work Sundays. I only had to work like 12 of them. My family got free passes and all the perks. Well, then my kids started getting good at skiing and started to race. Well, they raced on the weekends. So all of a sudden I was working on a day that my kid was ski racing. So instead of being able to watch his ski race, I was running a program for the ski hill. It was great when my kids were in ski lessons and then I'd be skiing around the hill and I'd see them and say hi and we'd wave. It was not so awesome when I was at the ski hill and my son's racing at another resort and I don't get to be there. So I decided, you know what? Yes, there's great perks. Yes, this was a lot of fun. It served its purpose. The opportunity costs are too great. I don't get these ski races back. There's only so many of them during my lifetime. I'm going to retire from the ski job and be a parent. So again, evaluating what the opportunity costs. What are you doing with that time that you now can't use that time for other things that you might be interested in looking at? So sometimes when we're climbing our mountain, we realize that maybe it is our mountain, but it's bad timing. Or maybe it's time to pivot and shift things a little bit on our mountain. So one of my mountains was building a business in the financial service sector. I had this idea of what this business was going to look like. I rented a building. I put the sign on the outside of the building that had the last name. I had the secretary. I had like this office looking absolutely beautiful. And I envisioned clients coming in and meeting with advisors and just being your standard financial advisory practice. However, the universe had different plans. One of my clients was involved in credit unions, and we actually ended up building a business around servicing financial institutions like credit unions to offer investment advice to their membership. I didn't need a building because my advisors were in the buildings of the credit unions. So all this time, money, and energy that I put into that building didn't even line up with what we ended up doing. Is it a bad thing? No. Did I lose a lot of money? Yes. Did we make it up in other ways? For sure. I had to go where the business was being driven. So sometimes the mountain looks a little bit different than what you originally planned, and that's okay because you're going where the energy is being pulled. It's the same thing with this podcast. I love podcasting. I don't love the barrier of Zoom. I feel like I don't get to connect to my guest as well, and that also affects the end product that you get to listen to. So I'm shifting things up. I'm going to do in-person interviews. I've already done a few of them, and I'm so excited to release them. to give myself time to make them available to you, I'm doing these episodes for the next little bit. So was it what I planned? No. Is it working? I think so. You guys are going to have to let us know. So things to consider when you're deciding, like, do you pivot or do you persevere? Are you making progress? And does it look like progress is going to be made soon? This is real easy in a mountaineering situation because you have to make decisions timely. The weather shifts, time's working against you. The longer you're on the mountain, the more dangerous life is. So you want to get off the mountain always as fast as possible, and you're always making decisions in the minute. We've had to climb down on 2 mountains. It just wasn't safe to continue. That didn't mean I was quitting. It just meant that now wasn't the time, and it made sense to pivot, turn around, and come back another time. Both of those mountains have been summited in much better conditions and much safer environments than that happened the first time. So when you're looking at your goal, maybe it gets tabled for a little bit. Maybe that book just was taking too much time away from your family and you need to redirect that back to the family and put the book out a year or 2. It's still successful. You're the only one that's putting the limit on yourself of when it needs to be done. Another thing to consider if you're deciding, do I continue on or do I pivot, is check in with a mentor or somebody that has a neutral stance on the situation. When I was on one of the mountains and we were deciding, do we continue, do we not continue? We actually used the satellite phone to call in to get a different perspective on the weather than what we had access to. That different perspective confirmed that we should go down. I've had mentors in my financial service business say, hey, Jen, I know you really like this lane, and that's why you're putting a lot of energy there. But if we look at the numbers, that's not helping you any. You really should be redirecting your efforts this way and go down that path. And so sometimes we get emotionally attached to things and don't always make the best business decisions. Having outside advisors to give you advice can help you see different things from a different perspective and help you pivot or maybe even climb a different mountain. And then another thing that I think is really important when we're deciding on whether we want to turn around or keep going is that gut instinct. You have that nagging feeling inside of you. And the more you learn how to tune into that and follow its direction, the stronger that intuition gets. And the stronger that intuition gets, the more confidence you have in the decisions that you're making. I know when I slow down and just connect to myself, if I'm really trying to push something or if I'm in the flow of something. And when you're doing these big, hard pursuits, it's way easier to be in the flow than be pushing. So anytime you decide that you don't want to continue that business plan, you don't want to continue that relationship, you no longer love the dream job, there's a lot of emotions that come up with this. I want you to understand that that's part of the journey. And it's okay to feel frustrated, sad, angry, and grieve this dream that's no longer happening. It's going to take a while to have acceptance around it. So that's why I think it's really important for you to know who you are and who you want to be. So when you're looking at a situation and you're deciding, do I continue to climb or do I turn around? You can understand that when that sad feeling comes up, or when that disappointment feeling comes up, you're like, yeah, I knew this was going to be part of it. But I also know in my heart of hearts that I'm doing the right thing. And just accepting those feelings and understanding that they're going to happen helps you navigate them. I find that when I'm making decisions to change, like when I decided not to climb Broad Peak and turn around, and then had another incident happen that you can read about and turn around, and I came home without a summit, there was a lot of victim mentality that was really easy to latch onto. So instead of allowing myself to be in that space, I started to dump all those emotions, thoughts, and feelings on paper. I called it the grump dump. And when I started dumping this on paper, I could look at each line item and be, okay, is this a legit concern, or is it something that I was just in a bad mood so it made it bigger, or is this something that I need to look at before I come back to this mountain again? And I think it's really important for us to look at what we're saying to ourselves and what we're feeling about the situation, because it allows us to pivot and allows us to tell a different story than maybe the one that's running in our head. It also allows us to say, oh, wait, safety was a big issue for me on those climbs, and you'll read about them. That safety showed up a bunch of different ways. We didn't have enough fuel to melt water. We ran out of oxygen tanks. We ran out of ropes. We ran out of like a couple other things that made it a little risky to continue climbing, which is one of the reasons why I turned around. All of those things came to one issue of safety. So it wasn't like we had 20 problems. We had one problem that manifested 20 different ways. And when you're able to look at it that way, it allows you to say, okay, I can control this situation. I can go back, or I can say, yeah, this was bad. Here's how I'm going to handle it different next time. We really learn from the mountains that we decide not to climb. They give us a lot of information about ourselves and who we are. And that information helps us make better choices for ourselves and our future. Thing that I think helps me the most when I'm deciding not to climb the mountain is identifying the next mountain I want to climb. Because I have all these habits and all these things that I've been doing that now all of a sudden I'm not going to be doing anymore. And when you're not doing something, you have that energy that you need to put somewhere. And if it doesn't have somewhere positive to go, it tends to accumulate and bring you down. Because you remind yourself like, oh, the reason why I'm sitting here is because I quit X, Y, or Z. You didn't quit. You chose to do something different. So when I get rid of a goal, I make sure I have another goal that I can step into and start making progress on, because it allows the pivot to be a lot easier to metabolize. Recognizing when the mountain isn't your mountain is a very individualized choice. I'm letting you know there's no timeline on anything in your life. If it's worth pursuing, it's worth pursuing. The need to take a back burner, if you decide to pivot because you learned more about yourself in the pursuit and decided something else was worth your time, embrace it, enjoy it. We all know a handful of famous people that came about things later in life or because of a pivot. Vera Wang was an Olympic athlete, and then she got into fashion. That's a huge pivot. Look at that success. So I like to keep stories on speed dial of successes of when I've pivoted and when I've decided not to climb. Because then when I'm put in that situation again, it gives me the confidence to know, hey, I've done this before. It's opened great doors and great opportunities, and I'm confident this situation will too. Hopefully this helped you recognize when it's time to stop climbing or pivot on your mountain. Next week's episode, I'm going to jump to chapter 7, my favorite number, and it's when we talk about when the goal is not the goal. So listen in. If you like today's episode, be sure to like, subscribe, and share with a friend. We'll see you next week.